All right, we are live and getting started. Welcome. You want to kick us off, Matthew?
Yes, I am happy to kick us off for our 1-year anniversary Lyceum. Can you believe it? It's been a whole year since we launched this crazy idea into the world called the Accounting Alchemy Network. So my name is Matthew Hagum. I'm one of the co-founders of the Accounting Alchemy Network. Of course, I'm joined by Ingrid Edstrom, who's my partner in the journey of this experience. And of course, we've got other people behind the scenes who are helping us as well to build this community. And what is this community all about? Well, in my own words, as it applies to my practice, it's really about helping accountants to understand how to prioritize people and planet over profit, right? Ultimately, one of the things that we stand for is this idea of a regenerative accounting professional, somebody who's concerned not just with keeping the status quo, right? Often referred to as sustainability, or sometimes referred to as sustaining or sustainability, but rather thinking about ways that we can engage with our work as practitioners in the conversations with our clients and in conversations and in collaboration with our team members, our vendors, etc., around how we can make a difference in the world around us. So whether it's addressing climate issues that are really important to your community, or taking an examination and really thinking about your approach towards racial equity, or anything that falls in the spectrum of frankly doing good for the world, we are concerned about that. We're bringing that forward here at the Accounting Alchemy Network. And we are so excited to have Gail Perry with us back again. Last year, she was with us to kick off this journey. And we'll hear from her in just a moment. But before we do, Ingrid, you want to add some more highlights or some more comments to the welcoming remarks for our 1-year anniversary?
I think you kind of nailed it, Matthew. Hi, everyone. I'm Ingrid, for anyone who doesn't know me. And yeah, Matthew and I came up with this crazy idea shortly before we kicked this thing off a year ago, and just working to figure out how to turn the accounting profession into a vehicle for positive change in our world, and asking the questions of what does that look like, and developing community. And this journey has been one of the most amazing journeys of my life. And I'm so excited to be inviting whoever wants to join us on this journey to join us on this journey. And we've learned so much over the last year, and we're really excited to kind of recap some of that with you today, and to talk about what's next for the Accounting Alchemy Network, and where we're kind of taking things from here, recognizing that we're making this up as we go. So, and you're welcome to come make it up with us. We don't have all the answers. We are looking to hear from our community what you want to see and what's important to you. So thank you.
Cool. So we thought we'd start off with just some quick highlights, if you don't mind, Gail.
Introduce Gail first.
Yeah. But before we do, why don't you introduce yourself, say hi, and maybe say a few words about your own reflections on having been with us from the beginning to the end, and just some of the curiosities that you have.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Gail Perry. I'm editor-in-chief of CPA Practice Advisor magazine and website. And I would, first of all, like to say happy anniversary. I'm really happy for both of you. And for everyone who's involved in the community, because you've crossed that 1-year mark. So, I mean, that it's an established community. It's not going anywhere. It just gets better and more robust all the time. So actually, the first thing I was going to ask you was to reflect on the year that has passed and what you feel the highlights have been from that year. But I'm going to tell you, first of all, if you don't mind, one thing that I think you have specifically accomplished, where I think a lot of what you've done is gather information and provide resources and talk about issues, which is great. But I think there's a specific thing you've accomplished, and I compare it to several years ago. Actually, it was about a dozen years ago. A friend of mine got very sick with cancer, and a group of his friends put together a website so that we would all stop pestering his family with, how's Greg doing? And so the website for a while was updating on Greg's condition, and Greg did pass away. But the website, this was over a dozen years ago. The website remains today, and it's like this pastoral place that I can just go to when I'm thinking of my friend, and other friends of his are there, and we all have become connected through him and through spending the last dozen years reminiscing and or saying this happened today and I wish I could share it with him, or that kind of thing. I had never experienced that kind of place on the internet before. And the fact that it's still there and still thriving and still, it's just like going to a garden or a peaceful place where I can just, even if I don't post a comment, I can just feel like I'm still connected. And I kind of compare that to what you've created. Not that it's like a cemetery sort of place, but that it's a place people can go to think about what's happening in the world, in the profession, amongst our peers, share some ideas if you come up with something, or just read the things that have been posted, watch some videos of what's already transpired and what people have had to say. And that place isn't going anywhere. It's only going to get more robust. And I think that the fact that you've created that, and it's a place that exists where we can share our thoughts on anything, is kind of unique in the profession. I don't know anything else like it. I love it, and I love what you guys have done. And so you have accomplished that so far, and I'd like to hear what else you feel recaps the year that you've gone through.
Thank you so much for that reflection, Gail. It's amazing to hear that. And I hadn't quite thought of it in that way. And I mean, cemeteries are beautiful. That's kind of part of the point of a cemetery. And, in the same way that nature is beautiful, it helps us feel connected to the past, connected to the future, connected to each other and community. And yeah, looking at that from that perspective and figuring out what those conversations can inspire us to do in the world. What kind of action do we want to take? And at the same time, I'm reminded of Arkan Lashwala, who is a shaman with the Ashuar people. He's one of the educators within the Pachamama Alliance's education framework. He talks about how in order to discover what is ours to do in the world, we first need to ask ourselves what we can be. And that place of reflection and connection and just being present with these discussions and thinking about it, I think is a really important place to start, especially for accounting professionals who are often very linear minded thinkers who want a recipe of, just tell me what to do. Well, are we putting the cart before the horse? Who are you? What can you be? What are your aptitudes? What inspires you? And that self-reflection really is the first and most important piece of this journey, and creating opportunities for us to be able to do that together is huge. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it has been such an amazing growth journey, is because those are the kinds of conversations we're having.
Yeah, agreed. And I would say, so to kind of be explicit about my response to your question, Gail, I think one of the biggest sort of rewards this year was actually our collaboration with the Pachamama Alliance in the space of reflection and considering what we can do. And to your point, Ingrid, about who we are being, I think that material, the Awakener course, the Game Changer Intensive, and the Introduction to Community Climate Action Training, the sort of 3 key programs that we advocate for inside of our community, each one gives the participant an opportunity to really do some deep reflection about what's going on in their community, literally their next door, their friends, their family, their coworkers, right? So it's very grounded in sort of the personal side of this conversation. And I think that's valuable in the context of what we're talking about, because we do know that one of the hurdles for people is the sense of overwhelm, right? Of, oh my God, the issue is so big, and what's going on with the UN, and how are they handling the climate accord, Paris, whatever. And it's like, oh my God, I don't have any control over any of this stuff, right? And so being able to bring it back down to that kind of personal level through this training material that they offer is it's very practical and very insightful and very inspiring. So yeah, I would say that would be probably my my biggest takeaway from the experience so far.
Matthew, since you brought it up, can you give a little bit of a description of what the Pachamama Alliance is?
Yeah, sure. I'll give my best description at the current moment. So the way I see it is the Pachamama Alliance is a nonprofit organization. They've been around for a while. One of their leaders is a woman named Lynn Twist, who wrote the book The Soul of Money. And really, I think at the heart of the Pachamama Alliance, it's about saving and protecting and restoring the rainforests, but also the planet, and really creating an ecosystem of volunteers, organizers, mobilists, and activists to do the work in their community, right? To take these ideas of the indigenous people that they learned from in the Pachamama Alliance and say, hey, how do we bring this conversation about stewarding the earth to our own communities and change the narratives around around how we relate to the earth. And what we can do with each other as a community that's different. So that's how I would translate or transcribe what the Pachamama Alliance does. Ingrid, would you want to add anything to that?
I think you did a pretty good job. I guess the main thing that I would add is one of the core focuses of the Pachamama Alliance is in climate justice. They do a really great job through their education of demonstrating how our climate crisis and the social justice issues impacting our world and our people are inextricably intertwined. And when I went through the Game Changer Intensive course the first time myself, what really struck me was the realization of how those two things, climate crisis and social justice issues, are also inextricably intertwined with the narrative of money and finance in our world. And how in order to effectively impact those things and make things better, that we need to address the fact that right now, the cornerstone of our culture, money, finance, which is all a story that human beings made up. If humans were to disappear from the world, money and finance would disappear with us. That those stories are unsustainable. They are extractive of our planet and exploitive of our people. And they don't necessarily have to be. There are ways that we could be using money and finance in regenerative ways that support life, but that is not currently written into the story. And so looking at that picture from the perspective of an accounting professional, acknowledging that accounting professionals are the people in the world who are stewarding that story, and that we have the opportunity here to start telling a better story, and that we can change the narrative, that is the power that is in our hands within our profession, so long as we're able to recognize it and start asking the bigger, deeper questions and step forward into a more storyteller role. And it's not necessarily that we have the power or control. It's one of the things that we need to be shifting in our world, is this dynamic where people have power over anything or anyone else. If we can shift it from power over to power with, that together, as we empower each other, we have the power to do amazing things. And that removes the power dynamics that end up creating these extractive, divisive systems in our culture and our world, and that we can change that. And it starts by making that change within ourselves. And I feel like the Pachamama Alliance is a wonderful foundation for beginning that journey of change, so that we can approach these conversations in a more effective way.
So, over the course of the last year, you've brought in an array of really motivational speakers. And I'm given what you just said about the accounting profession and how change is not necessarily something that can't happen. And the speakers you've brought in, have there been takeaways from the conversations you've had? I mean, there's obviously the answer to that is yes, but what are some major takeaways that you've seen in the past year from conversations with incredible speakers about these topics and how they relate to the accounting profession?
Yeah, I'll give that a kickoff by just sharing an overview of some of the things that we've had conversations on. So just so you all are aware, we do have a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel has cataloged all of the Lyceums, both the spotlight Lyceums, the social forums, etc., and all of the content that we've managed to record on YouTube. So this is all available. But of course, we had our kickoff with you, Gail, on what is the problem. We had Janat Etienne come in on and talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We had Steve Pipe come in on taking climate action. Then we brought in the Donnie McClurkin, I think is that right? McClurkin and McClurkin and Donnie Shimamoto on ESG, which sidebar, that to me was one of the ones that like kind of blew my mind, which we'll get to. Then we had Clayton Oates come on the infinite mindset. We had Heather Satterley and Liz Scott come in on app culture. That was in preparation for the Appy Camp. Bill Hershey was the spotlight on his practice as a regenerative accounting professional. We had Harvey Penne come in, talk about his book launch. We had the prep call for the QuickBooks Connect panel that we hosted with several people from the community. And then we had a couple of other spotlights, including Rabina Benyon and Christine McDougall. And of course, we had Nithin Garg from Intuit come in most recently and talk about sustainability. So I think I'll highlight two of the ones that really kind of like shifted my brain a little bit, because I think this is part of the work that we do.
I just want to acknowledge really quick how many things you just lifted off. Oh my gosh, we've been busy. Like,
correct.
We had no idea when we had this call a year ago what was coming up, and next thing we know, we're like having all of these mind-blowing conversations with amazing people. We have packed it in over the last year. So
and they're all available to watch.
Yeah, I'm mind blown over the list that you just rattled off.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, that doesn't include all the social forums, and it doesn't include the book club that we had, and it doesn't include, what else does it not include? It doesn't include the initiative that we started at Appy Camp with CPA moms with Mayumi. So there's and it doesn't include all the Pachamama stuff that we've done, and it also doesn't include all the great content that's flowing through our social sheets. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I have to say we've done quite a bit, right? To be fair, just a little. All right. So the two pieces that really kind of like shook up my world. One of them was actually the two Donnies, right? I talked about ESG and sort of this concept of the post-growth world. And, you know, I was very involved in my early career in a community called Conscious Capitalism. And it was a great community. And I think in many ways it still does do great work, but there was still this sort of underlying question of that there maybe was something missing, or there was something else that wasn't quite there for me. And I didn't know what it was. I just kind of let it go. And it's like, oh, whatever, I guess I just don't know, until I got introduced to the concept of something post-growth or post-capitalism. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, there is a future beyond this stuff. And that's when it started to kind of like make a different level of sense for me, right? And then the other one that really sort of shifted my perspective quite significantly was actually the conversation with Nithin from Intuit. And I say that because you know, I'm sure, not for nothing, but you hear people complaining about the cost of Intuit subscriptions, and like it's a thing. Like some people have things about that, right? Which is okay, I get it. And when you hear what they're doing with their resources, right, there's some really powerful stories about, for example, I remember there's one about them funding a school or funding the green initiatives of the school, and being able to reallocate some of those financial resources back to the school so they can pay for other things because of the offset of the costs around the electricity. To me, that was like, wow, okay. First of all, I didn't even know that you were doing that. And secondly, that you're doing that, that's a really powerful example of not just like greenwashing, which is a criticism of larger practices around their, work in the quote community. But that you're actually creating systemic change because you're redirecting financial resources from something that is not regenerative to hopefully something in the school that needs the funding and the resources it doesn't have, right? So those were two that really stood out for me. Yeah. What about you, Ingrid?
As much as I could go on for hours about every single one of our Lyceums, never mind that the Lyceums are generally only an hour, I could talk about them for hours. I think that the most impactful discussions for me have been the more social forum Lyceums and the small group discussions where we're really hearing more deeply from our community members. And in particular, the discussions that are coming out of the Game Changer Intensive course, particularly the one that we're in right now. So we're in the midst right now of leading a Game Changer Intensive, and that wraps up later this month. And then the next opportunity to register for the upcoming Game Changer Intensive is April 2nd. So if you haven't gotten the chance to do this yet, come, please join us. And just hearing from the people who are participating in those discussions, how that content is changing them. That hearing about the things going on in our world, studying and learning about these issues and having an opportunity to discuss and unpack them and relate to each other on how these things are impacting us on an emotional level, and thus impacting our choices in the world of how we show up in these discussions and what we want to do about all of this. It makes a huge difference. And it's those conversations that I feel are really, really instrumental to the work that we are doing here in the Accounting Alchemy Network. And yeah, I can't share any details of those particular calls because they're private to the people who are in the call. So that's where I'm like, hey, if I can poke your FOMO, your fear of missing out just a little bit and be like, no, seriously, come try this. That content is changing perspectives and by extension, changing the world. And I think that that's where the real gold is.
I think it's heartbreaking to me that all of us are at the mercy, for the most part, of politicians and media for the information that we get.
Yeah.
And all of that is shaped based on the person who's presenting it and or the organization that's presenting it. And that just, I think the more that you guys can do to provide opportunities for people to hear whatever the truth is about whatever a topic is huge. And then bringing in the financial angle of how this is either impacted by the economy or how our profession is either impacting it or could have an impact is huge. And I just think, again, it goes back to going to your site and just giving people food for thought, the opportunity to think about, oh, I'm doing this with my clients and it's having this impact, or I'm not doing this with my clients, but I could be. And or if you're a corporate accountant, this is what my business does. What are the underlying motivations, and what good are we doing in the world, and what's the positive that we can focus on or do more of. Speaking of the speakers that you brought in last year, was it difficult finding people to come and speak, or did you have a
we have a list of people that we want to talk to? I mean, like, as I'm looking over our list of, oh my gosh, mind-blowing people to have discussions with, and our schedule is stacked, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get back to Barry Tesler. She's been waiting for us to schedule with her. I'm like, Barry Tesler, we get to talk with Barry Tesler. That's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to coming up this year. We just have to get her on the calendar. And we're like, oh, and we've got all these other things that we're also doing. And yeah, I'm just mind blown at the amazing opportunities coming our way to have these discussions with such powerhouse people. I feel so honored and privileged to be able to create this space and to be able to share it, recognizing that Matthew and I do not need to be the only ones hosting these discussions. Part of what we've worked to create within the Accounting Alchemy Network is a community that has decentralized leadership to empower our members to step forward. Anyone can create a Lyceum within the Accounting Alchemy Network. And so if there's a conversation that needs to be had within this space, it does not need to be, dependent on Matthew and Alina and my volunteer hours to create this. If someone's feeling inspired, we invite you to step forward and do this. And one of the places where we've been really inspired on how to create that, we're very, very blessed to be working with an advisor from within the Pachamama Alliance. After I went through the Introduction to Community Climate Action Training Program, the ICAT training, last year, Pachamama reached out to us and said, hey, can we offer you an advisor to help, with whatever you need? This is a great project. We want to put our efforts behind yours. And so Pachamama is paying for an advisor to help us with some of this stuff. And one of the first things that Heather did when she started working with us was she had us read a chapter of a book that dug into the Otpor movement in Serbia 20 years ago, and how this grassroots movement with decentralized leadership overthrew a dictatorship, and how they went about that with such amazing values. And fortunately, we don't currently have a dictator to overthrow. We've got ideas that we're trying to evolve and other ideas that we're trying to overturn. But at the same time, I feel like our job is both easier, but also longer reaching, that this is not going to end when a government is overthrown. There's always going to be learning and growth and work to do here in the Accounting Alchemy Network. And in order for that to be regenerative and effective, we need to invite other leaders to step forward to create what we want to see together. And that what Matthew and I have done is put together the cultural framework, the container that can exist in. And within that container, there is so much potential. And so that's where I really want to start focusing our energy, is on the potential for other people to create the change that you want to see in the world.
So what kind of outreach have you had to the accounting profession, and have there been challenges there, or how has that grown over the course of the year?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is Ingrid and I have a list of people that we're like, okay, we need to email all these people, and we have, and we've kept a track of that list. I don't know how many people is on that list at this point.
The list has grown beyond what we can reasonably reach out to.
Good.
Correct.
Great.
So many amazing people.
Yeah. And if you recall, and for those of you who are new to this community and listening now, one of the things that was at the onset of the founding of this was being very intentional about who we invite in, right? Because we didn't want to create a space of naysayers and individuals who would be taking other people down and trying to prove their point and make people wrong. And that's not what this space is about. And we introduced the concept of our communications framework to help facilitate effective dialogue around some of the issues. And some of these issues can be polarizing for some people, depending on their circumstances and their beliefs and their backgrounds, et cetera. And so we wanted to create a space where dialogue could be had across a multitude of perspectives. And part of our outreach, therefore, I think included thinking very, very clearly about, like, okay, who is this person and what new perspective are they bringing to the conversation, to add dialogue to the community. And so we've been very intentional about that. And now what's really cool, thanks in part to you, Gail, because we had that article that got published on your platform, and it helped to increase our awareness, and we started getting some new faces in the group. And now our LinkedIn and our Facebook group I think we're at 84, 85 people, and there's sort of some overlap between the two groups, but in general, that's a pretty good number. We've got an email list to match that, right? And so, and I think though the container of the social media groups are contained by, a somewhat of a, okay, let's check this person first before we accept it, method. The truth is our YouTube videos are out there. Anybody in the profession that are curious about these topics, if they simply Google them and do a little bit of digging, they're going to find some of this content, right? And we even published an article on Intuit's blog recently about some of the work that is going on. And so, so we start, and then we hosted the panel discussion at Intuit on sustainability with members from the community. And so we're now at that, we started that experiment of like, okay, what does it feel like to expand the conversation? And I think to address your kind of question or curiosity around perhaps some of the challenges that we faced in doing this outreach work, I think one of the biggest recurring hurdles that many professionals have this, many people have this is time, right? Oh, I don't have time. I can't, how do I squeeze it in? And what's funny about it is two things. One, first of all, you hang out with Ingrid and I and some of our community members, you're most likely going to start meditating more and doing groundings, PS, which, by the way, makes you more productive. So it's sort of ironic how, you spend like 30 minutes meditating, all of a sudden you get things done faster. Anyways, that's a whole other conversation. But the other thing that I'll mention is it's not, and I've gone through this experience and I go through this experience still. I think we all do, but of like, okay, I don't have the time. I just got to do what I can, do the best I can. And there has been a principle of do what you can and show up when you can, because we don't want, time to be the limitation for you to even begin the conversation, because a lot of this is about beginning the conversation. But the other thing and this is sort of the last thing I'll say, is it's not about doing more, it's about changing your being and doing. And so what I mean by that is, as I've gone through this experience and interacted with the content and collaborated with Ingrid and took some of the things and applied them to my own practice, it actually is making it easier for me, right? It's helping me to streamline my ideal client or customer profile. It's in fact added some partnership opportunities and some collaborations that expand my reach beyond who I am, right? And my own limitations of my own circles. And I've started some really awesome conversations with through one of my projects around climate action that has to do with my target audience around the arts. But what's ironic about that, it's sort of the non-linear results, right? It's like I'm busy doing this thing over here, and then all of a sudden the increase from my services, like the leads are going up. But I'm not focused on the leads, I'm focused on doing this thing. And I think people are attracted to that energy of like, wait, this is a person that's doing something in the world. I care about that. I'm going to show up and ask them about their services because I want to work with somebody like that, right? And I think that's that flipping of the switch. And I just, one last thing, and then I swear I'll be quiet. Then the other part of it was like the pricing dynamic. I had this whole conversation around pricing strategy and ethical pricing and ethical sales processes and how I wanted to approach that. And there was a conversation that occurred in the Awakener program, which is the entry point for the Pachamama work, where I was like, that was another moment where I was like, oh, click, okay, different relationship to pricing now that felt equitable and more related to this regenerative future that we were creating. So it's actually, if you think about it, it's like an incubator for my opinion, the real firm of the future, right? That's really, I think, what this is creating. I love you into it, and that's my 2 cents.
Nice.
I want to spur off what Matthew was just saying, because as an award-winning Intuit firm of the future, I want to just acknowledge where I remember back in 2015 when I, got 3rd place in the very first Firm of the Future contest. thinking about the pillars of the firm of the future, which is based off of Ron Baker and Paul Dunn's book, The Firm of the Future. And those pillars did not include community. And I felt like they were missing something. And so I love that you went there, Matthew, because I think that you really, really hit the nail on the head, that the true firm of the future is not a competitive firm. A firm of the future is creating a rising tide that raises all ships and has a regenerative focus. And yeah, I think that that is exactly where this is going.
Yeah, I don't even know where conversations about competition fit in our profession, because people talk about it, but I've never really seen examples of firms that are like, out there trying to beat each other up to see who gets that client. I mean, there's so many clients to go around. Why we even have a discussion about competition is kind of beyond me.
Yeah, it's interesting because competition is one facet, one face of a general scarcity mindset. And that scarcity mindset is pretty endemic in our world right now. It's a situation where, I guess to bring it back to Lynn Twist, Matthew was mentioning Lynn Twist, one of the founders of the Pachamama Alliance, has a wonderful book, The Soul of Money. And actually her next book, which is called Living a Committed Life, just came out a couple months ago. And it is wonderful also. But in her book, she talks about what she calls the 3 toxic myths. And the 3 toxic myths are that there's not enough to go around, that we're going to have to fight for what we can get, that more is better. And so we constantly need to be trying to get more. And that's just the way that it is. And so there's no point in trying to change it, because that's how it's always been and that's how it's always going to be. And that these 3 toxic myths kind of feed each other and form this foundation of scarcity in our society that sets people up to be greedy and have every person out for themselves. And it's not effective. It's not sustainable. And we can shift that by recognizing that true security is not financial. True security is relational. When things really hit the fan, when there's a catastrophe, a disaster, we demonstrate our true wealth by people coming together and supporting each other. So why does it take a disaster to be able to do that? How do we generate that kind of community support on the day-to-day so that we're not siloed into our rather colonialist perspective of having to be individuals fighting for everything that we have and scraping things together and needing to keep up with the Joneses and hit certain benchmarks for success, that even when we hit those benchmarks for success, we get there and we say, wow, I've done everything that the recipe said I was supposed to do. Why am I not happy? Why am I rooted in this anxiety and depression? Why do I feel unfulfilled? And it's because we're not in our areas of genius.
Right. And the 2 have nothing to do with each other.
Exactly.
How successful you are in your business and how happy you are. People keep trying to tie them together and say, I can't be happy unless I'm successful, or can't be successful unless I'm happy. But it's like, they're 2 separate things and you can work on them separately.
I feel like Charles Eisenstein actually said it best in his book, Sacred Economics. And I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the exact quote, but he said something along the lines of, the purpose of life is not to just survive in maximum security and comfort. The purpose of life is to create that which is beautiful to us. And I like to add, and share it with others.
So, and I saw that Sarah posted a question about if it's a popular opinion that there's really no need to worry about competition, why do 99% of firms have employees sign a non-compete clause? I think that's a really great question, and I don't really know the answer, because I do think it's out of habit, as she mentions, but firms are somehow afraid that their employees are going to leave and take their clients with them. But honestly, if their relationship with their clients is that vulnerable, then the clients ought to be able to go wherever they want. And not be prevented from going with the accountant who's leaving the firm. I think that the concept of a non-compete compete clause is pretty archaic, and I don't know of a single accountant out there who's saying, gosh, I just can't find any clients. I don't have any work to do. Everyone has the opposite reaction. It's like, I have too many clients, I have too much work. Oh, busy season, I can't stand it. And, so I just think that that whole concept of competition is pretty outdated.
Yeah, I also think that therefore there are sort of remnants of the old way, right, that are done just because that's the way they've been done, and so like changing that we've done it that way is sort of a, maybe not a priority for some people. And yet also I think that particular issue, the non-compete clause, sort of reminds me of one of the big things that we talk about a lot, which actually came up in our first Lyceum with you, was around the culture piece, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, Peter Drucker. And a lot of our conversations is around shifting the culture to be humane workplaces. And so then if you think about a humane workplace, that where everything from the hiring of the team member through to the unfortunate termination or departure of the team member, that if you imagine that from the lens of being humane, then this need to have this fear-based legal mechanism in place, granted, things happen, yes, and I feel like there's maybe a bigger question there about, like, how do we invite firms to step away from or out of the finite mindset, the fear-based mindset, and into one that's more regenerative, abundant, and about humanity, right? And then some of these old tools might actually just fall away, right? Yeah.
And it shifts the conversation then from a successful, however you define success in the workplace, to happiness with the people you work with, the clients, the colleagues. And if that's your focus, then you're not going to be worried about competition. If you're enjoying what you're doing and who you're doing it with, then things will fall into place. I mean, it's a really uniquely human thing. No other animals in the animal kingdom are worried about their happiness or their future, or how they can impact their future and do things for the greater good. And none of those conversations occur with my dog and the neighborhood bugs and stuff. I mean, it's just they're out there just having their daily life and not thinking about it. And the fact that we have this gift, I think, of the ability to think outside of just scraping around for food every day and getting enough sleep and making sure there's a roof over our heads. I mean, we have the ability to change our lives, and it's pretty amazing. And we can do it in such a way that we make our own ecosystem better, but also that we go outside of, and I think this is what you guys are striving for in the Accounting Alchemy Network, is going outside of your own little bubble and making an impact on others and in the world itself.
So I guess with that, Gail, I would love to toss a question back your direction. Looking at things retrospectively, to our conversation from a year ago on what is the problem and the things that you've learned and seen over the last year, what is your current view on the problems at this point? What are the biggest issues facing our profession and the world? And what do you see that accounting professionals can be doing to impact those things?
I would call on one of the comments that Matthew made about time. And in fact, I've taught courses on time management, and I think it's one area where we can have such a great impact on our lives, is if we use our time in a way that we find satisfactory and that affords us the ability to do the things we want to do. And tying that into the accounting environment, I think if we can focus on not killing ourselves, during tax season, since it's high on everyone's minds right now, since we're in the middle of it, but and looking out for each other, I think that I don't know. I'm what comes to mind when you ask me about where we can have an impact and what we can control and what the problem is, the solvable problem. It's that at the end of the day, the work we do is designed to help other people. And if we focus on that and allow our clients to welcome us into their businesses or their lives because we're there to solve problems for them, I think that that kind of focus is going to impact us more than some new technology that helps us do our jobs more efficiently, or adding more clients, or even changing the services we offer. I just think focusing on the relationships is huge.
Thank you. I love that. That's beautiful. And I want to acknowledge that that's not something that we're teaching people in an accounting degree or much at accounting conferences. I mean, that's a topic that I teach on at accounting conferences, and sometimes getting onto the list of like, oh, hey, these are the things that are being taught at this conference. It's not something that's talked about a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we talk about in Empower Your Passion, which is the mastermind group that I lead within Richard Ropa's Roundtable Labs community. That's something that we talk about quite a bit in there, is role playing through what does that kind of relational relationship rather than a transactional relationship, what do those conversations look like? What does that feel like? And how do we practice doing that? Because it's a skill that needs to be built. It's like strengthening a muscle. And one of the ways that I've been using to explain kind of where to start with that is that, like so many other things, that change happens inside of ourselves. And it starts with employing a little bit of what Matthew was saying, that meditation, the somatic practice, a little bit of grounding, and really employing habits that get us out of our left brain thinking. One of the beautiful opportunities that I've had over the last handful of months, I've been participating in a coaching program with Lynn Twist and Sarah Vetter called the Sophia Circle. And it is a program focused on leadership in the divine feminine. And the amazing guests that we've gotten to have conversations with within this group include people like Nobel laureate Lema Bowie and Marianne Williamson and Reverend Demna Johnson, and also Jill Bolte Taylor, who's the author of My Stroke of Insight and Whole Brain Living, which I still need to read. But getting to have a conversation with Jill Bolte Taylor about how our brains work, and there's actually 4 of us up here, that on the left side, we have our linear thinking of planning around the past and the future, and that is fueled by the left rear of our emotional memories of the past. And so our plans for the future end up recreating the past, and we end up spinning in our left brains. And accountants are often very left brain linear thinkers. And on the right brain, we have our emotional experience of the present moment. And then back here, we have our awe and wonder of just being alive and aware that we're alive and that we're aware that we're aware. How mind-blowing and cool is that? And that we don't get to spend enough time in the right hemisphere of our brain. And that there are things that we can do to shift our thinking over to that. But it's that this side is the more relational, more creative, thinking outside the box, coming up with new solutions, making sure that people feel emotionally well, and that we're not getting emotionally flooded and spinning out and fight, flight, freeze, fawn and trying to. So it's really just regulating ourselves and having better awareness of what it is our minds are even doing and establishing the habits to be able to care for ourselves. And that when we start looking at some of these pieces that we're discussing around relationships with our clients and pricing and time, how we perceive time differs depending on whether we are using the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere of our brain. And when we start using the right side a little bit more, we go into Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. He talks about Einstein time, where time comes from. So if you want more time, just make more. And if anyone hasn't read The Big Leap, I highly recommend it. It's a magic book, a grimoire masked in a self-help for business owners kind of thing. Gay Hendricks is amazing. So yeah,
at the end of this, you need to put in the notes the names of all the books that we've referenced here.
So many books. And meanwhile, people are like, oh, when do they get time to read?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that right there, if you're like, I don't have time to read, I'm busy doing all this other stuff.
That's a problem.
An old
That's
anecdote.
a problem that can be solved.
Yep. If you don't have 15 minutes to meditate because you're too busy, it means you need an hour.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Well, we are coming up at about 10 minutes. So I did want to create some space to share a little bit about what's next.
That's what I was going to ask you. So perfect.
Oh, great. So we're all on the same page. All right. So for those of you who are subscribed to our newsletters, very explicitly, we have a couple of things coming up that I just want to make you aware of. We did mention the Pachamama Alliance and the various levels of engagement with them. The entry point into that work is a program called The Awakener. The Awakener is available on demand 24/7. It takes about 80 minutes to move through the content. And as Ingrid would suggest, it's good content to move through with maybe your family, maybe do instead of watching Netflix tomorrow night or Friday, or tomorrow's like, yeah, Friday night, maybe watch some of this content with your family. It could be a really interesting way to spark some conversation. We do have a registration code in the email. So if you need that, please drop a comment below. We can help you with that. But also then we follow up the Awakener on Monday, March 21st at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time with a social forum. I'll be hosting a gathering of those of you who have moved through parts of the Awakener so that we can kind of ground in what this means for you and what insights and inspirations you gain so that you can decide how to then move forward with that content. And then if you do complete the Awakener, you then qualify to participate in the Game Changer Intensive, which per Ingrid's earlier comments is where we see a lot of transformation with people around their relationship to some of this work. We also have on the 24th of this month, our ongoing series with Mayumi Young from CPA Moms on humane workplaces. It's a monthly call. Again, registration information is on our social profiles and in the email. And then on 3/30, March 30th, we have a social forum on culture KPIs and fostering healthy teams. It's a social forum, so anyone is welcome to join us. And we are spotlighting 3 community members who have very clear things to say about some of this work: Shana Etienne, Donnie Shimamoto, and Alexis Sadler. Then on 4/10, moving into April, we have our Jedi training Lyceum with Shana Etienne. Jedi, for those of you who don't know, is an acronym for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Training. Some of that content, if not all of that content in certain ways, is inspired by the Cost of Whiteness programming that's offered inside of the Game Changer Intensive. So you can see how all this stuff kind of weaves together. So those are the immediate and upcoming things. Ingrid, anything else you want to sort of share about the future and possible things that might be down the pipeline?
There's so much. I guess I just want to highlight a little bit more. The Jedi training is really a cornerstone of the work that we're doing. Just like I mentioned how in the Pachamama Alliance, the climate crisis and social justice is inextricably intertwined. And so really needing to put some focus on how do we call out the elephant in the room, the elephant being institutionalized racism, patriarchy, and colonialism, and start talking about these important subjects. Because if you can't feel it, you can't heal it. And we need to be having these discussions. We need to be breaking open this barrier of professionalism that's keeping us from feeling into and resolving some of these very deep core issues in the profession that are rooted in the very deep core issues in our society. And so, yeah, Jana and I are working together to figure out, how do we do that? And the work that we're doing, the discussions that we're having, is pretty groundbreaking. And we invite anyone who wants to participate in that to step forward into those conversations with us. And really, in particular, we are wanting to elevate and amplify our BIPOC leaders in our community, and making sure that leadership opportunities are available for people doing this work. And for myself, acknowledging that I, as a white-bodied person, am not the best person to be leading that conversation. And so trying to create the spaces where we are cracking this open and acknowledging the harm that has been done, and working to heal the harm that has been done, and working to create what it looks like moving forward to have a more diverse, equitable, inclusive space where everyone can feel belonging and succeed. So that is a piece that we're putting a lot of emphasis on. And also, yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, well, sorry, do your also, and then I want to add one
Okay,
more.
just, yeah, also the work that we're doing with our advisor from the Pachamama Alliance, Heather, there's a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes that we are looking forward to inviting our community into in various ways, you know, probably small group conversations, because having large forum conversations around them can end up being a lot of witches in the kitchen all at once talking about big ideas. But we've moved into working on our theory of change for this movement, and what that looks like. And creating a theory of change is something that's, you know, kind of big and unknown to me. That's not something that I've led businesses through before. So being led through it by someone else holding that container is really kind of rocking my world. And that this is an organic movement that we're kind of being led by spirit to a very big extent here. And so we don't know exactly where it's going. We've got some really, really good ideas. And a lot of those ideas are inspired by what our community is asking for. So be the change that you want to see in the world. Step forward, let us know what you want. And we might be like, oh, you want that? Would you lead it? That would be great.
Correct. Yeah, no, just sort of underscore that was kind of my comment. If for those of you listening, I refer to Ingrid's earlier comment and repeat comment that we are always looking for people in the community to step forward and lead these conversations and host the social forums and host the Lyceums and guide us on the topics. And so I think to answer your question, Gail, part of our work with the Pachamama Alliance around the consultant that's been brought in to support us is really thinking about how do we make it super clear and super easy for people to come into this community, feel empowered enough to then shift themselves into a place of finding right action for themselves, right? I mean, that looks different for different people. Some people, the right action is to attend and to listen and to be a part of the conversation on that level. And some people, the right action is to actually take the lead, host the conversation, pull the resources together and do the promotion and whatever else it might mean for them. And so I think really thinking about how this group of people who have come together now can be activated so that this continues to become an effective decentralized network of professionals seeking change in the world. That's, I think, where we're really placing some attention now.
Yeah. Well, and adding really briefly to that within that space of creating those actions, and a lot of people coming into this space trying to figure out what it is that is theirs to do in this work, get very overwhelmed very quickly because there is so much. And recognizing that we are not doing it alone, that it's not all on anyone's shoulders, that there is a lot of information, and that we don't have to solve it all overnight. And that there are tools within the Game Changer Intensive that teaches us how to work with that overwhelm and remain in a place of grounded optimism, so that we don't just look at all the issues facing the world, get depressed, and not get out of bed.
and that's an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it's
I would-
overwhelming.
I would like to think that your site, your atmosphere here and through LinkedIn, it would provide people with the knowledge that they can bring an issue forward and say, I'm dealing with this. I need it.
Yes.
And the smaller the issue, the better, because smaller issues are easier to work with and solve, and then you can move on to something else. But I'd like to see those kind of conversations coming forward in the year ahead. And I just I know we're almost out of time here, but I want to say again, happy anniversary. And I'm really looking forward to a year from now to see what has transpired in this community.
Yes, I am so looking forward to that as well. And thank you so much, Gail, for joining us today. It feels so amazing to be coming back together after a year and saying, oh my gosh, what did we do? Like when we first started this thing, I was like, I know that we're doing something really cool and amazing, but I had no idea the can of worms that we were opening, and all snakes jump out, and like, it's been such an amazing journey, and it's going to continue to be an amazing journey. And it is, at this point already has a bit of a life of its own, and we're just kind of running to keep up with it.
That's the best. That's the best thing. Yeah.
All right.
Well, yeah, just want to say thank you to you, Gail, of course, for being here, but also to all of our Lyceum guests over the last year, and the community members that have gotten involved and are tuning in and doing what they can. I just want to say, on this 1 year anniversary, we want to appreciate you as well, because it is about community and it is about collaboration. And so thank you. And don't forget, we got some awesome things coming up. So yeah, we'll drop the notes in the comments.
Wonderful. And thanks for everyone who joined us online live, whether on Facebook or here in Zoom. And yeah, continue the conversation in LinkedIn and on Facebook and in the comments on YouTube, and let's save the world.
On it.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Matthew. Talk to
Bye,
everyone soon.
Gail.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Bye.